Hi everyone. Today is the review session for your class, Game Theory, Intro to Game Theory, Strategy and Introduction to Game Theory. And I'll be discussing a few review questions. And if you have any other doubts, conceptual doubts, especially from the rest of the course, you can just tell me and I will address those also. So just give me a moment. Let me join the meeting from my other device. So also we'll have the regular class on Tuesday. There's still 1 week left, perfect Bayesian equilibrium. So that will happen as normal on Tuesday. Okay. Okay. So just a quick recap of what all we have done so far. So firstly, we went over what are dominant strategies, what are weakly and strongly dominant strategies, and how a dominant strategy equilibrium is different from any other equilibrium, and how basically if you have a dominant strategy in any game, your game itself becomes a lot more simpler. It's a lot easier to solve. But if you don't have dominant strategy equilibrium, what we do is we look at mixed strategies, in which case the main difference between a pure strategy and a mixed strategy is that one of the players has a certain belief about what strategy the other player might be using. So if the other player, player 2, has two possible strategies, and player 1 has a belief P about strategy A, say suppose, and the other strategy, strategy B, has then probability 1 minus P. So then in that case, player 1 is going to calculate their expected payoff considering both the strategies. So P times player 1's payoff in strategy A and 1 minus P times player 1's payoff in strategy B. So that is their expected payoff. And then we see that, at what point, at what values of P is one indifferent between choosing either of the strategies. So we calculate this payoff for both the strategies of player 1, and then we see at what point the payoff from both the strategies of player 1 are the same. So at the point at which payoff of player 1 from the first strategy is equal to the payoff of player 1 from the second strategy, at that point we can automatically understand that player 1 is okay with either strategy, right? So that is the probability at which player 1 is okay with either of the strategy, and okay with either strategy is a layman term for what we call as randomization of strategies. He will pick any of the two strategies randomly. So when player 1 has a certain belief P about the other player's strategy, at the point at which player 1's payoff is same for both the strategies, the value of P for which player 1's payoff is same for both their strategies, you will see player 1 randomizing their strategy. Okay, so this is an important point. Most people confuse this point. So I just wanted to highlight that. The probability P is for the other player, and at the value of P for which the payoff is the same, player 1 is going to randomize their strategy. Okay, it's not determining the player 2 strategy. Similarly, or you can just say, if you just consider the opposite case, if player 2 has a certain belief about player 1's strategy, some belief Q, then similarly player 2 is going to do their calculation and they'll find the value of Q at which Player 2 is indifferent between choosing either of their strategies. So that is your mixed strategies. Then we came to extensive form games, which are generally sequential games. Like first one player decides something, and then the next player decides something. But even simultaneous move games can be represented in extensive form, which is the tree, the tree type diagram. And after extensive form games, we studied subgame perfect equilibrium. So we also found out that not all Nash equilibria are subgame perfect. We understood what are subgames in the first place, and then what are subgame perfect equilibria. So subgame perfect equilibria always considers the every strategy played in every subgame. So the subgame itself should also be in equilibrium, not just the entire game. Okay, so even if you're hypothetically taking a strategy of of some subgame, that strategy should be a subgame strategy, subgame equilibrium strategy also. Then we talked about Bayesian games, and in Bayesian games, we came across a very different concept from what we studied before. In Bayesian games, we know that there is one player, then there is the other player. Taking the most simple case, player one and player two, and player two can be the player is only one, at least in the traditional sense. There is only one player two, but player two himself or herself can be of two types. Generally, take two types. Actually, it can be more, but just for the simplest possible case, can be of two types. And those two types, the basic fundamental difference between those two types is that one type has some different information from the other. Okay, so for example, let me just write this down instead of only talking. So if you're talking about, say, a Bayesian game, in a Bayesian game, there are two players, player one and player two. Now, here we are not talking about probability of choosing a strategy. That is important thing to understand. Like remember, in mixed strategies, we were talking about the probability of playing one strategy versus the other. That is not what we are doing in a Bayesian game. In a Bayesian game, we are saying, say, suppose player one is only one type, and player two is of two types. Okay, say player two A and two B, just using a certain nomenclature. And player 2A and player 2B are differing in some aspect as far as their knowledge is concerned, which is why player 2 can have two different strategies or two different payoffs in either of these situations. So in both of these situations, 2A and 2B, 2A and 2B can be of two different types. These are the two types which can lead to.
Madam, I suppose you are writing something which is not visible.
My screen is not visible.
Your screen is visible. I think you are what you are writing on the writing pad is not visible.
You want me to write bigger?
This is not visible at all. I think you might not have shared that. I mean, we can see the slide with the recap as the caption, but
No.
nothing
My
else
screen is shared right now. The OneNote screen is shared. You can't see that.
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay. The other person is saying that he can see. So, okay. Let me stop the screen share and restart it. Can you see now?
Yes, now it is visible.
Okay. Right. So different strategies or different payoffs. Okay, so these two, or instead of putting this arrow here, let me just put it like this. So these two can be different in terms of what strategy they're playing or in terms of what payoff they are getting. So example, like, in the Kurno case, when there are two firms, Kurno model, Kurno duopoly, you see, there is a difference in payoff because, say, suppose their cost structure is differing, right? One firm has low cost structure and the other firm has high cost structure. So in that case, because the cost structure is varying, their, like the best response function is going to be different, which is what is leading to some kind of a difference in strategy. Whereas if you see the battle of sexes game, in which you have a Bayesian game, in which we don't know if the girl is interested or uninterested, you see the game itself is the same. They're both types are playing the same game, and the strategies of both the types are also the same. So remember, we can make. I will just make a generic um, diagram for battle of sexes. So if you remember, it was something like this: player 1 and player 2, and let's say this is x, this is y, this is x, this is y, and here the payoff is 3 comma 1, here it is 1 comma 3. Then let's just take this as 0 0 for simplicity case. Okay, it's something like this. Instead of 0 the 0, this can be 1 1 or -1 -1, whatever, right? Now this is, say, suppose for type 2a, and similarly we made the same game table. So this is for 2b, and here the player 2b has different payoffs because the player is not interested. So say suppose this is 3 -1, and here this is a 1 1, here this is a 1 1, here it is, say, again 1 -3, something like that. Okay, so again these numbers are made up. I'm not making these numbers as very sacrosanct or something. These numbers are all made up, but you can understand it's the same game table, and the strategies available to 2a and 2b are the same, x or y, right? There is no other difference. What the difference is in their knowledge or information, as we normally say in game theory, right? In 2a the girl is actually interested, and in 2b the girl is not interested in going out with the guy, right? So in this case, the problem for player 1 is he does not know which type the other girl is. So in these type of situations, it's important to remember that the structure of the game is mostly going to be the same, especially at your level. The basic rules of the game, the basic game table, everything is mostly going to be the same. Similarly, if you remember the spy game I had discussed in one of the previous classes, in that again we had two countries, and the discussion or the question, the strategies were for country 2 to spy on country 1 or not, and for country 1 to hoard or stockpile weapons or not. Right? They were the same strategies. Only difference was the country 1 type was unknown, where the country 1 could be aggressive or non-aggressive, and hence the payoffs of both the countries were changing, right? Not just one. So here, also actually in the game table, I have made the payoffs of both the people both the players is changing, but it may not always be the case. Sometimes the payoff of one player may change and the other player may not, and sometimes it may be both. So that's the basic idea of a Bayesian game. In a Bayesian game, you may face all sorts of differences, but the core difference between the two is the level of knowledge, right? One of the players knows something more or something different than the other player, and hence, because of that, that lack of information, to the other player, as per the other player, the player 2 can be of two different types. And I'm saying two different types in the simple case. It can, of course, be of more types. And in extension of this kind of a Bayesian game, we discussed auctions in which we took the valuation as a uniform random variable in a continuous interval 0 comma 1. It can be 0 comma 1000, it can be a comma b. So remember that, like, in most of your like lecture and even your examples, it's sort of always been on the interval 0 comma 1. But the same kind of calculations will be there even if it is on some interval 2 comma 3, 3 comma 4, 2 comma 4, whatever, right? So don't get confused by that. Just remember that just use the basic idea, the basic calculations used in a uniform random variable. Okay, so let me start today's few questions which I brought with me. So first example I want to take is of an asymmetric Uno duopoly. And in this is a question from Joel Watson. And we have an example of an asymmetric duopoly where the cost structure of two firms is different. So the price or the inverse market demand function is given as P is equal to 12 minus Q1 minus Q2. The cost of firm 1 is 2Q1 and the cost of firm 2 is 4Q2. Okay, so there is a difference between the costs. Now, some, like, actually in the question itself, they have already written the utility functions or the payoff functions, but I will still prefer it if you write it yourself. And you're supposed to you're supposed to report the best response functions of both the firms and find the Nash equilibrium. So I will of course solve it, but I want to mute myself for a few minutes so you can think about it, and then I will solve the question. Because I mean, if I solve the question, it's my exercise, my practice. But if you solve it, it's your practice, right? So I'm just recapturing the question here. Yes, I'm just writing the basic structure of the questions here. You can see that here. Right. Okay, so this is pretty much it. There are two firms, they're choosing their output level Q1 and Q2. Price is given by this equation, costs are given by these equations 2Q1 and 4Q2. And you, although the payoff function is given, but I'll ask you to write it yourself so you understand, and have a little bit more practice with writing the payoff function. So I'll mute myself now. This is all the information that is there in the question. So I'll start solving it in say 2-3 minutes. In that much time, I'll just let you go over the question once. Think over the question. Okay, anyone wants to try? Anybody solve it? First, let me write down the utility functions. It's already given, but we can still use this time to write it. So yes, so basically you will find out not the welfare, sorry, utility maximizing values of Q1 and Q2, right? So remember, there is a difference between Kuhn and Stackelberg. Okay, in no, it will not be negative. You have made a mistake somewhere. So I think some people get confused between Kuno and Stackelberg because the format and the equations look very similar. Remember, in Kuno, both the firms are choosing simultaneously. The firms are choosing Q1 and Q2 simultaneously and independently, right? One is not influencing the decision of the other. And you can also say that all this is common knowledge. These are things not mentioned explicitly in your question, but it just helps to detail this out. What exactly are we doing here? That all this stuff, function of cost for one, function of cost for two, market demand, all this is common knowledge. And Q1 and Q2, the firms are choosing independently and simultaneously without discussion, so to say, right? In the Stackelberg game, that is not the case. In the Stackelberg game, all this market demand, cost function, everything is known, but the firm 1 is choosing Q1 first. It is not a simultaneous move game. And after firm 1 has chosen Q1, and Q1 will also be a function of Q2 because, after all, market demand is affected by Q1 and Q2. But firm 1 is the first mover. And then firm 2 is choosing Q2, because of which Q2 can be written as a function of Q1. And instead of just directly differentiating and getting the value of Q2, you will need to substitute the value of Q2 as a function of Q1 back into the equation of firm 1. This is in Stackelberg, right? That's what I'm trying to point out, that there is a difference between Stackelberg and Kuno. Sometimes, if the question is Stackelberg, people forget and they solve the Kuno case instead. So be careful, read what the question says, and you will be okay. So utility is, or payoff is what? The profit minus the cost, right? So profit is not profit, sorry, revenue minus the cost, Q1. The expression in the bracket is the price into Q1 minus cost is 2Q1. And utility of firm 2 is this expression into Q2 minus 4Q2, right? This is um, this is basic micro. There's nothing complicated here. Now each firm maximizes. So they are going to maximize their payoff with respect to this strategy QI, where I is 1, 2. Okay, which means it's all again also important to remember that if you are firm 1, you can only control Q1, you cannot control Q2. Sometimes this is a very simple expression, but sometimes after differentiating you may get something like an expression of Q2 is equal to 5 or something like that. That is not the best response function of firm 1. I think in your in your syllabus you don't have questions like that, thankfully, but sometimes you can get that kind of a case. Even in, I think it was in the last class or maybe the class before that, we had a case where you weren't getting anything based on just taking the differential. So be careful, you have to find an expression for Q1. Okay, if you get anything for Q2, that is not the best response function. Therefore, you will take del U1 by del Q1. Now, this comes out to be just taking the differential. Okay, you can multiply the bracket term with Q1 and write that. If you feel comfortable that way, you can do that. So this is now easier to differentiate. We can simplify this, and 12 minus 2 is 10. 10 minus q2 divided by 2, or 5 minus q2 by 2 is equal to q1. You can say best response of 1 as a function of firm 2's output is this. This is your best response function. Okay, this is how you report the best response function. Or you can also write this as q1 star is equal to 5 minus q2 by 2. Okay. Similarly, we will do this for the other firm. Okay, this is we simplify this to write q2 star. 12 minus 4 is 8. 8 minus q1, the whole thing divided by 2. So 4 minus q1 by 2. So when you will write the best response function, best response of 2 given as a function of q1, 4 minus q1 by 2. Okay, so far so good. Now you have both the best response functions. Now at Nash equilibrium, both the firms are playing their respective best responses, right? This is only the best response function. This is not Nash equilibrium yet. Okay, so when we report this q1 star and q2 star, what we are saying is for any value of q2, if you plug in the value over here, you will get the best response of firm 1. If q2 is equal to 1, you will get 5 minus half as the best response of 1. q2 is equal to half, you will get 5 minus 1 by 4 as the best response of firm 1. So on and so forth, right? Similarly, when we're taking the best response of firm 2, it's going to give you the best response firm 2 for any value of q1. q1 is equal to 2. Best response of firm 2 is 4 minus 2 by 2, which is 1, is equal to 3. Okay, so these are best response functions. This is not the Nash equilibrium. At Nash equilibrium, both the firms are playing their best responses. Therefore, both the equations, let's label this as equation 2. Both the equations will solve each other, or you can solve 1 and 2 simultaneously. Therefore, solve 1 and 2 simultaneously. So, in both these equations, you can start with any equation, whichever one you like. You are given q2 star as a function of q1. You can plug in that value in the equation for q1 star. q1 star is 5 minus q2 by 2. So, let's write this here. Into q2 star. Now, let's put the value of q2 star, which is 4 minus q1 star by 2, right? So this will give you x2 is 3 minus or plus q1 star by 4. So you take it this side, 4 Q1 star minus Q1 star by 4 gives you 3 Q1 star by 4 is equal to 3, which gives you Q1 star is equal to 4. That's the answer. Now you plug in the value of Q1 star into the equation for Q2 star. Q2 star is given by 4 minus Q1 by 2. 4 minus Q1 star by 2. 4 minus 4 by 2 is equal to 2. Therefore, Nash equilibrium is 4 comma 2. So this is the answer. I'm not sure what mistake you made, but I hope you found it now. Were you able to find your mistake? Oh, you had missed some sign. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is your example of some uh, basic Uno model. So in general, if you remember, if the if the cost functions and payoff functions are the same, if the cost function was also 2q1 and 2q2, then both the quantities would have come out to be equal in equilibrium, right? But that is not happening in our case because the cost structure of the two firms is different, and hence the answer is going to be different. We know that even before we solve it, actually. Okay, so now we go to another game. Okay, I hope my screen has updated. So now we'll go to an extensive form game where you have two players, and first the player 1 selects between I and O. I and O are two strategies. Okay, I and O are the two strategies of player 1 in the first part. And if the player 1 selects O, then the game ends. The game ends over there, and the payoff vector is x comma 1, where x is some number greater than 0. We don't know what x is. It's not given. X is not given. If player 1 selects I, then this selection is revealed to player 2. So you see, obviously in the first stage, there is no action from player 2. Player 2 comes into play if player 1 plays I. Then both the players play a battle of sexes game, okay, in which they simultaneously and independently choose between A and B. A and B are two strategies, and as you can read from the question, both of them are choosing between A and B after that. So if they coordinate on A, the payoff vector is 3 comma 1. If they coordinate on B, the payoff vector is 1 comma 3. If they fail to coordinate, the payoff vector is 0 comma 0. So represent the game in extensive and normal forms and find the NE and find if there are any SPE and so on and so forth. Okay. So first thing I want to check if you are able to draw this game in extensive form. That is the first step of any extensive form game. I mean, unless the table, like unless the diagram is already given to you, it is just really important that you're able to draw any game in that tree format. Okay, so I'll mute myself for just 2 minutes. Just take 2 minutes and draw the extensive form game, and then I will draw it. And just remember that in the second stage, they are both choosing simultaneously and independently. Okay. So I read your answer. You can just check your diagram against what I draw in the. I think you can't send a picture in this chat. Not sure if you can. But if you want, you can share a picture of your diagram in the chat. I will look at it. But otherwise, for your own reference, you can just compare what you made with the diagram I'm drawing. Okay, so let's draw this diagram. Now there are two players, one and two. Player one plays first, and he or she chooses between I and O. So this is O. This is I. This is player one here. Here the game is ending. Payoff is X comma 1. X comma 1. After this, you have the option open to player 2. He can choose between A and B. So say suppose this is A, this is B. And after this, we are assuming player 1 is acting again, but player 1 doesn't know which choice player 2 has made. Just trying to make it a bit neat. Give me a moment. Okay, and after this, player 1 is acting here again. So remember, you have to write the number or name of the player at each node also. So you know which player is playing. So the strategies are written on these lines, branches or whatever, and this is 3.1. So you have to write the payoff at the end, the terminal node, and the number or name of the player at the node, the strategies on the the branches of the tree, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that is the complete extensive form games. So if this is an MCQ kind of a question format in the lectures. But if it is an actual, written exam, if you don't write all these things, you will lose marks generally. If you write only the payoff or only the strategy, if you don't write the name of the player or something, if you miss something, that's not considered a complete answer. And if you don't make the dotted line also, you will probably lose marks, because this dotted line implies that they're both making the decision simultaneously. So the answer is going to be question. I think exam is going to be MCQ itself. I have never taken the exam myself, so I don't know the format of the exam exactly. But I believe your exam is expected to be MCQ, because I don't think for such a big class there will be any form of exam. So now let's write this down in the normal form or the strategic form. Okay. So this diagram you're okay with? Is your diagram correct? Okay, great. So if you've got the diagram correct, like half the battle is won. So now let's write the game table. So player 2 has only two strategies, A and B, right? Player 2 is moving only once in the whole game. So he has only two strategies, A and B. So player 2 has only two columns, whereas player 1 is moving two times. First, he moves and chooses between O and A. Next, he moves or she moves and chooses between A and B. Okay, so there will be how many strategy options for player 1? 4. Exactly. So we will write these four: O A O B, I A I B. Okay, so let's write the payoff. If player 1 is playing O, any kind of O, OA, OB, whatever, the game is already ending actually. So the payoff is given by X comma 1. Irrespective of what B strategy might be, this is all X comma 1. As long as it is O and it is OA, OB, and even for any strategy of B, the payoff is going to be X comma 1. Now, if player 1 is playing IA, and player 2 is playing A, then payoff is 1, sorry, 3 comma 1. If player 1 is playing IA and player 2 is playing B, then this is 0 comma 0. Similarly here by symmetry it's this. This is your game table. Okay. Now we will want to solve for the Nash equilibrium, and we will check if there are any Nash equilibria which are or are not subgame perfect. Okay. So in this, let's just quickly look at the best response of player 2. For player 1, we know that there is an X over there and we don't know X. So we will come to player 2 to player 1 later. Let's see for player 2 first. So if player 1 is playing OA, he is okay with both the strategies. Similarly for OB. If player 1 is playing IA, then player 2 would rather play A. And if player 1 is playing IB, player 2 would rather play B. So these are the best responses I've marked for player 2 only. I've not marked it for player 1 yet. Now let's just look at this, just stare at this table a little bit. So if you can see, just compare, try to look at the best response possibilities for player 1 given some strategy of player 2. If player 2 is playing A, we see that we have to compare the values of X and 3, right? If X is greater than 3, then this is the best response, X greater than 3, right? Or you can say X greater than or equal to 3, because if it is 3 also, then he is indifferent between all. Or let me do it this way, slightly more. Equal to is this. For X greater than 3, OA and OB are best response of player 1, right? And if X is equal to 3, then OA and OB are best responses, but IA is also another best response because they're all the same, right? If X is equal to 3. Now let's see what happens if X is less than 3 but greater than 1. So this part is sorted, right? If player 2 is playing strategy A, then if X is greater than 3, the best response of player 1 is OA/OB. And if X is equal to 3, it is all these OA/OB and IA. And if X is less than 3, obviously, will come. If X is less than 3, obviously it is IA. So I will write it out later properly, but I hope what I'm saying is clear. I'm not writing everything I'm saying. I will write the best response in any later on. So now let's come to what happens if X is less than 3 but greater than 1. Let's look at the second column where player 2 is playing strategy B. Now, if player 2 is playing strategy B and X is greater than 1, in this case actually it doesn't matter that it is less than 3, but if it is greater than 1, less than 3, then OA and OB are the best responses of player 1. If X is equal to 1, then OA, OB and IB all three are best responses. And if X is less than 1, only IB is the best response, right? So whatever I'm saying in words, let's just write this down in proper, like, mathematical sentences. Let me move this down a bit so I can see this. Okay, so let's first start with the case if x is greater than 3. If x is greater than 3, then what are the Nash equilibria? Let's write all the NE then. If x is greater than 3, then OA, comma A, OA, comma B, OB, comma A, OB, comma B. All three are Nash equilibria. All four are Nash equilibria, right? If x is we've not missed anything, right? No. If x is equal to 3, then you can add this whole list plus you can add IA, comma A. You have to write all this all over again. Trying to take a shortcut. Let's see if it works. Oh, it's not going to work. It's trying to avoid typing, but it seems okay. It worked. Okay, let's move this. And one more, which is IA, comma A, right? So this is if x is equal to 3. Now we have to come to the case of x lying between 1 and 3. If x is less than 3, then if you see the case where player 2 is playing A, if x is less than 3, then IA, comma A is the only best response of player 1, right? A. This is the best. This is the place where both the players are playing their best responses. IA, comma A. And if x is greater than 1, less than 3, and player 2 is playing B, then you have the first two options, OA, comma B and OB, comma B. Right? Those are the two Nash equilibria. Now we come to the last case, or we can take one more case as x equal to 1. If x is equal to 1, you have these two plus last one, IB, comma B. Okay, I just wrote plus IB, comma B. It's not working. Okay, I'm just writing plus IB, comma B. Okay, I mean, this is for your understanding anyway, so I think you will understand what I've written. If x is less than 1, now look at the first column. If x is less than 1, then definitely IA, comma A is the NE, right? Because why will you choose anything else than, why will player 1 choose anything less than 3? So IA, comma A is the best response. And if you look at the second column, if player 2 is playing B, then IB, comma B is the best response, because again x is less than 1. So it's not going to be a best response for player 1 anymore. So these are all the Nash equilibria for all the cases, like all the ways in which x can vary. Now let's go back to the game and see what happens in the game. So let's look at the second part, where they're playing the Battle of Sexes game. We know that if player 2 is playing A, then A is the best response for player 1, right? And if player 2 is playing B, then B is the best response of player 1. So if player B is going to play B, then player 1 is never going to choose A. And if player 2 is playing A, then player 1 is never going to choose B. So now we have to check for subgame perfection. So basically, any Nash equilibrium where player 1 is choosing the strategy A and player 2 is choosing the strategy B are not going to be subgame perfect, right? So whether it is OA or IA, if OA comma B or IA comma B, if they are NE, they are still not going to be subgame perfect, right? Let's see when we have that case. You have OA comma B here, and by similar logic, OB comma A is also not going to work. These are not subgame perfect, right? We have this here, and that's it, right? So all the highlighted equilibria are not subgame perfect, because when one is playing A, two will also be playing A, and vice versa. Okay, and two is playing A, one will also be playing A. So the highlighted. So only the highlighted NE are not subgame perfect. All the other NEs we have given in the whole discussion so far, they are going to be subgame perfect. Okay. So this is how you handle a question of this type. So it's actually a simple kind of a game, not very difficult. And the only thing is we have to draw the table and everything ourselves. Why isn't it? Okay, mine should be zooming till this level. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, so I'll move to the next question. All right, so let's go to the next question, which is on the Bayesian auction. And you had, I think, a slightly similar question in your exercises in your assignment. And I will just let you read the question and attempt it on your own first, and then I will solve it. So if you remember what we did in the class on Bayesian auctions, the only difference in those questions and this question is just one part where the CDF of the random variable is used. So we'll use a similar expression here, but we'll just discuss that bit a little bit more. So I'll mute myself and we'll take a break for 5-10 minutes, and then I'll come back and I'll solve the question. In the meantime, you can take this time to just solve the question yourself and see what answer you're giving. Because here you're actually given your own value. Your valuation is given as 3 by 5 in this question. So you can actually calculate your bid amount. So in my when it says what is your optimal bid, I want you to calculate your bid function as well as the final bidding amount. Okay, so I'll mute myself for a few minutes and we'll discuss it after that. Okay, so let's resume. Yes, you're, I think, sort of right. Uh, I will explain what part we will do. I mean, how we will solve that part. Okay. So, exercise 3, this is your Bayesian option. This is first price, seed bid, private value. Private value means each player has their own valuation. It's not some yeah, it's not an auction where the value of the object is common to all players. Okay, so there are these type of auctions where the value of the object is common to all players or partially common. Like, some component is common and some component is different. So it's not like that. So this is the first price yield bid private value auction. Let me open the question again. So your own valuation are V and B. Valuation and bid are V and B. And we are calling the valuation and bid of the opponent as V prime and B prime. And let's just write the utility function U of player 1. I'm just writing this as U because we are using V and B. Utility is V minus B if B is greater than or equal to B prime, and it is 0 otherwise. Or better is this. Okay, we know that given V prime follows a uniform distribution over the interval 0, 1, and we know that the bidding strategy of your opponent B prime, the function of V prime, is V prime squared. Okay, now we know V is equal to 3 by 5, and we have to find B. So this is the question, and we'll do what we normally do. First, we will take the expected payoff of the player 1 in the situation given. Just basically writing the utility function multiplied by the probability of winning. And since this is not an all pay auction, in an all pay auction, what you have as the payoff as 0 otherwise in first price. Unlike first price, in an all pay auction, if you bid, you lose, right? So the payoff would be something different from 0 if you lose. So this is not that situation. So you have 0 payoff, and hence probability of losing doesn't matter. So let's write expected payoff. So this is the payoff when you win, which is V minus B, multiplied by probability of win plus 0 into probability of not win, which is what we've always done. Okay, now let's plug in these values of probabilities. Probability of winning is probability of B greater than or equal to B prime. And this is 0 anyway, so I'm just leaving this out. Now let's look at this expression. B prime is what? It's B prime square, right? So therefore, probability of B greater than equal to B prime is equal to probability of B greater than equal to B prime square, right? Now, instead of V prime square, we know only V prime, right? We know V prime is a uniform continuous random variable. So we can write this in terms of another random variable V prime square, which is also going to be a random variable. But instead of that, we can also just make our lives easier, since V prime is greater than 0 and B is greater than 0. Therefore, we can just say this expression is the same as B prime less than or equal to under root B. We can take the square root on both the sides, and I've just flipped the expression now, right? So if we take the square root, we get B prime and under root B. So B prime is less than or equal to under root B. Now this expression is what I have discussed in the previous classes also. This expression is the CDF of the random variable V prime, right? Let me write this in some other color. So if that is probability of V prime less than or equal to Y is equal to Y, that is what CDF value is for a uniform random variable, because V prime is a uniform random variable on the interval 0, 1. So for that particular random variable, the CDF, the value of the CDF is simply Y. If the probability of V prime is less than or equal to Y, then that value comes out to be Y. Again, if you want, you can integrate it and solve it, but I hope that is not necessary. So is this clear how we got this value Y, and similarly how we got the previous expression? Should I move forward? Y is any random number, any number. Y, instead of Y, you can take 0.5, you can take anything. I'm just writing the general expression for the CDF. Oh, don't confuse it with this. I'll delete this if you don't want to. I'm not asking you, why is nothing in the question? If you have to write the expression for the CDF of some random variable. Here, remember, V prime is the random variable, right? V prime is the continuous uniform random variable on 0, 1. Is that clear? Now, if we take any number Y for any number Y belonging to 0, 1, CDF of V prime is given as what? That is the expression that I was writing. You sort of lost thread of it in between, I think. What is the CDF of V prime given as for any number Y on the interval 0, 1? This is the probability that V prime is less than or equal to Y, which comes out to be equal to Y, because that is how the function is defined. Yes, 0 to 1, the length of the interval is Y, and that is why it comes out to be Y, because it is uniform on that interval. So similarly, now if we use that same logic here, probability of V prime less than or equal to under root B is equal to under root B. So we'll plug in this value in the expression we had. Expected utility of 1 is V minus B into under root b. This is the expression we had here. Expected utility of 1 is b minus b into probability of b greater than b prime, right? So instead of probability b greater than b prime, we substitute its value in terms of this random variable thing which we just discussed, which is under root b. So you can further simplify this, b under root b minus b to the power 3 by 2. Now we will maximize utility of player 1 with respect to b. Therefore, del of expected utility 1 and b, we just take the differential. This is now b upon 2 under root b minus 3 root b by 2 is equal to 0. So this is just simple differentiation. We simplify this further to get v minus 3b upon 2 under root b is equal to 0. Now, of course, under root b is greater than 0. Therefore, we can say b minus 3b is equal to 0, and hence b, or you can say b star, is equal to v by 3. So this is your best response function. This is your bidding strategy. Right now, we plug in the value of b, and we it was 3 by 5, right? Into 1 by 3. This comes out to be 1 by 5. So your final bid is going to be 1 by 5. Rest of it is simple. Rest of it is not something too difficult. Only this part where you take the probability. Sometimes people make a mistake in this part where you are taking probability of b greater than or equal to b prime square. Instead of that, they assume somehow that probability b greater than b prime square is same as probability b greater than b prime, which is wrong. Or what they do is they take probability b greater than b prime whole square. Like they put whole square on the whole thing. They think it is the same thing as putting in whole square, which it is not. So if you see, if you take whole square, you will get b square instead of under root b. So the whole expression is going to go for a toss. The only thing you have to remember here is that instead of v prime square, you have to reduce it and bring it back in terms of v prime, because we know the distribution of v prime. You can, of course, take the longer route where you take v prime square as another random variable and you calculate its PDF and you calculate its CDF and you find the value of it, but it will give you the same answer eventually, actually. So if you have some other expression here, for example, instead of v prime square, if you have v prime cube, or you have v prime square by 2, some such expression, just remember to always bring back the right hand side in this case, or if you are looking at v prime less than equal to under root b. So make sure that that expression is always in terms of v prime. If you cannot do that, only if you cannot do that, then you can do a little bit more of probability calculation and stuff and work with random variables and, you know, calculate the CDF of the new random variable, the complex random variable. Sorry, not complex, composite random variable. So if it is something like v prime plus v prime square, then you cannot do it like this, because then it is a composite random variable, right? You cannot bring it back in terms of v prime, which is why you're not seeing questions of that type, because it is a little bit more complex. But in this case, it's not so difficult. You just take the under root on both sides and you get your familiar expression of probability of v prime less than equal to something. And in this case, that is under root b. So that value comes out to be under root b. Okay, the rest you just differentiate and you find the, because your valuation is given to you, we can calculate the answer, but most of the time the valuation is not given. You can just give the function, which is in this case is b by 3. Okay, so any questions? Okay, so I will move to the next question, and this is the last question for today. This is the it's a question on bargaining, and it's also talking about time discounting. So I thought this would be a good question. It is a little bit of revision for week 7 and also I think week 4 or 5. I don't remember which week you did bargaining, but it covers concepts from both the weeks. So there are two players and they are trying to divide a pie of size C, and for simplicity's sake we've again taken C as equal to 1. So in the first case, player 1 is going to play strategy X, and in that case he's suggesting a division with payoff x1 comma x2, where player 1 gets x1, player 2 gets x2. If player 2 accepts the offer, they get the payoff of x1 x2. If player 2 rejects, he gets to make a counter offer or a counter proposal, which is strategy Y, and they get a payoff of y1 and y2, meaning player 1 gets y1 and player 2 gets y2. Now, if player 1 rejects player 2's offer, then both of them get a payoff of 0. Okay. So, first player 1 is playing, then player 2 is playing, and then player 1 is playing. Now, we know that in the second period, they are both also discounting their payoffs by delta 1 and delta 2. Okay. Player 1 is discounting by delta 1, player 2 is discounting by delta 2. And we want to find out what is the subgame perfect equilibrium. And of course, x1, x2, y1, y2 all belong to 0, 1. This question is from Osborne, Martin Osborne, and it's an interesting question. So I've not discussed bargaining questions before, so I thought this is also a bit new. But I'll just again mute myself for a few minutes, and I want you to at least draw the diagram, extensive form diagram for the game, and then think about what backward induction, how we will solve this by backward induction. Okay, just 2-3 minutes, and then we'll solve it. Okay, done. Okay, let me see if I can solve. So no, this is not typical bargaining because this is a time discounted bargaining, which is why, um, yes, so it will not be exactly 0 and 1 like we had before. And this is sort of, bargaining is sort of like a repeated game. In this case, it's repeated only twice, but if I leave it open ended, you can obviously understand how it's going to go if there are more than 2 periods. Like we have taken this, played in, in 2 periods. So if instead of 2 periods, this goes, the game is repeated several times, then you can sort of figure it out how it's going to be. So first we have player one playing strategy X. Now remember, X is a continuous number. Okay, so when we say X, we'll have to represent it as a continuous thing between 0 and 1. Okay, so this is, because when you make just this kind of a diagram, 0, like just two of these things, then it implies that it's just, the choice itself is just one discrete number, whereas that is not the case. X can be any number between 0 and 1. Okay, he's not choosing between just 0 and just 1. He's choosing a number between 0 and 1. Okay, so let me also shade this. In most books, this is sort of shaded. Okay, so this is the first stage. And then player 2 is going to play here, and he's going to decide to say yes or no. So, oops, sorry. So player 2 says yes or no. This is player 2. This yes and no is not continuous time, right? Sorry, not a continuous function. This is a simple discrete yes no choice. So if he says yes, then they get x1 comma x2. He accepts the offer. The payoff is x1 comma x2. You can also take it as x and 1 minus x and x, or x and 1 minus x, whichever way, but this is just the way the question is given in the book, so I've just gone with that. So I've not changed the nomenclature and things like that. But right, so after this we have 2 playing the next part of the game, where 2, if he rejects, if he says no, then 2 is again going to choose the next part. So remember, 2 is playing again after this. This is not, you can't condense these two things in one step. These are 2 steps. So either he accepts, which is y, gets x1, x2, or he rejects and he gets, or he proposes something else. Now this is also a continuous function. This is also 2. That's why it's important to mention who is playing. And he proposes something like y, and I'm going to shade this also, so it's kind of obvious that this is a continuous thing. And when he proposes, then player 1 is going to play again. Player 1 is playing here, and then player 1 can accept or reject. If he accepts, then they get y1 comma y2. If he rejects, they get 0 comma 0. Okay, so this is the diagram first of all. So before you start solving any question, no matter how brilliant you are, it's just always important to write down, to draw the diagram, the extensive form diagram, especially in a game which is obviously best characterized in extensive form. I know a lot of times we think that we can just skip the diagram, we already know the value y1, x1, blah blah blah. But it's important to draw this so you understand what is happening in the game. unless you draw the diagram, you may sometimes miss the fact that player two is playing two times in the second stage itself. Player one plays, then player two plays, and then again player two plays, and then player one again plays. Okay. Okay, so that's for the diagram. Now I have written this as y1, y2, but you don't correct me here. So this will not be y1, y2, right? This will be delta y1, delta 1 y1, delta 2 y2. It would be y1, y2 if it was a normal, like a normal bargaining game. But this is a bargaining game with time discounting. So he gives the division y1, y2, but it's also mentioned that they are doing time discounting. So y1 and y2 will be, okay, why can't I write it? They will also be discounted. Final payoff will be discounted. The division is y1 and y2, but payoff is going to be delta 1 y1, delta 2 y2. Or like how we normally do, delta 1 into y, delta 2 into 1 minus y, whichever way you like it. Okay, so now let's just discuss what happens in a typical bargaining game first. Like this is a repeated game and this is the time discounting, but in a normal bargaining game, if one is making the decision, and if it were a normal bargaining game, the game would just end here. If two says no, they both get 0, 0, right? This is in a normal game. So in a normal game, the game ends here and the payoff they get is 0, 0. So player 1 is going to offer x equal to 1 for himself and 0 to the other person. And he's always going to accept, because if he rejects, he gets 0. So his dominant strategy is to accept, to always accept, right? If player 1 is offering 0, if player 1 is offering anything other than 0, he's definitely going to accept. If he offers 0, then also player 2 is going to accept, because accepting and rejecting both are anyways giving him a payoff of 0. Okay, so this is a normal game. Similarly, in the second part of the game, where player 2 is making the offer, similarly he is going to want to offer 1. He's going to want to offer 0 and keep 1. So if y, or you can say y2 is equal to 1, y1 is equal to 0, that is what he will want to offer, right? And player 1's strategy is going to be to always accept, right? Because he's getting what? He's getting 0 otherwise. If he rejects, he gets 0. If he accepts, he gets, in normal game, he would get y1. Here he is getting delta 1 y1. So obviously he is going to accept. So let's move by backward induction. I'm erasing this now because I don't want to confuse people. So in this stage, game is going to move in this direction, right? In the last step, game is going to move in this direction. Yes, and y2 is going to be 1 and y1 is equal to 0. So their payoff is going to be 0 here and delta 2 here. I'm just writing this in colored thing because this is this is not the final answer. This is just part of the calculations we are doing in the middle of the whole thing. Okay. So here in this final step, player 2 is getting delta 2 and player 1 is getting 0. And if you move back a little bit to the first step, now we are saying in the previous step they were getting x1 and x2, right? So x1 and x2 is not decided yet what x1 and x2 would be. All we knew was that player 2 was accepting it all. Let me write this in some other color. If it were if it were only the normal game. I'll delete this later, but this is what it was going to be if x2 was going to be, if the game had been played in only one stage. But now you see, if he says yes, if player 2 says yes in the first part of the game, he gets x2, right? And if he goes to the next stage of the game, he gets delta 2. So now his choice is actually between x2 and delta 2, right? And player 1 can see that in the second part of the game, player 1 is getting 0, right? And here he is getting x1. So now player 1 is going to choose between x1 and 0, and player 1 will want player 2 to accept, right? If player 1 offers something to player 2 which player 2 wants to reject, then in the next stage player 1 is definitely going to get 0. That much is clear to player 1, right? Am I making sense so far? Okay, so let me write this down what I just said, because it's not obvious from the diagram. So he's getting x2 and delta 2 from two stages of the game. All right, and player 1 gets x1 in stage 1 if player 2 accepts, if player 2 accepts, 0 in second stage. This player 1 is definitely getting 0 in the second stage. Whether he accepts or rejects is the same thing, right? Because player 2 is not going to offer anything other than 0 in the second stage. Let me write that also down. Okay, so what player 1 wants? See, player 1 has the advantage of being the first mover, right? So if player 1 wants to get anything more than 0, he will want player 2 to accept the offer in the first stage, right? Therefore, player 1 will want player 2 to accept in first stage. Therefore, player 1 must offer, therefore, or first stage, let me write. So only and only if player 1 offers x1 comma x2 as something more than, okay, this, let me write this properly, this is not correct expression actually, offers x2 greater than delta 2, because that is, yeah, x1 comma x2 greater than, that doesn't make sense. So if player 1 must offer something to x2 which is more than delta 2 for player 2 to accept, because player 2 knows that if player 1 is offering any x2 less than delta 2, he can always go to the next stage and he can always make a counter offer offering 0 to x1 and keeping delta 2 to himself, right? So player 1 must offer x2 greater than delta 2. Therefore, or let me say this, write it like this, player 1 offers 1 minus delta 2 comma delta 2, and player 2 accepts. This is subgame perfect. So this is a Nash equilibrium, and it is a subgame perfect equilibrium because because of what we just rationalized so far. So the game proceeds in this direction, where player 1 is going to offer something. This is greater than delta 2, and this is equal to 1 minus delta 2. So this is the direction in which player 1 will offer. This is the direction in which the game will move, and this is what player 1 is going to offer. So is this clear? Okay. So I actually brought only 2 questions. I thought it will take more time to cover them, but so I finished the questions which I brought. If you have any other conceptual or any other doubts, you can tell me and we can discuss that. We have around 12-13 minutes left still. There's not much to add in reference reading today. Week 6 assignment question 2. Okay, let me open this. Just give me a minute, let me open the thing. Consider the Bayesian first priced sealed bid auction with n bidders, denoted by players 1 and to n, let the private valuations be Vi and independent and uniformly distributed in 0, 1. If all players I are bidding Vi square, what is the best response bid V1 of player 1? Okay. We'll see what question you have. Basically, both question and 2 both seem similar. So, is there any specific doubt you have in this? You are not getting that answer. So, I don't think I have enough time to solve the whole thing. But let me just see. So, what I just discussed in the class, it is very similar to that. Actually, if you wanted me to solve this, you should have told me this earlier. I would have taken some time to solve this earlier. But anyway, let's see. So you know what the normal process we have followed so far. Yeah, so basically what the only difference, let me just explain it in words actually. So you see, in this expression you will eventually get that same expression, right? Vi square less than b, and for that you will now need to raise that whole expression to the power of n minus 1. Let me just write this quickly. Valuation of I, or sorry, not valuation, payoff utility of I is equal to Vi minus B. Therefore, expected utility of I is Vi minus B into probability of win, right? If B is Bi is greater than Bj for all j, right? And probability of win here is equal to probability of B greater than or equal to Bj, and Bj is what? Vj square. So, and this whole thing into n minus 1. Because only this ith persons This is BI actually. So BI. Only if BI is greater than all other bits, he's going to win. In all other cases, he's going to lose, right? So in all the cases where he's going to lose, his payoff is anyway 0. So you don't need to consider those cases. So even if his bid is less than any one person, even then he's going to lose. So all those cases, payoff is 0. The only case in which he gets any positive payoff is if BI is greater than BJ for all J belonging to, J is equal to, as I explained in the previous class, blah, 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 I minus 1, I plus 1, blah, blah, n, right? So total n minus 1. So all the other n minus 1 players are making some bid bj each, and he has to win against all of them. So the probability of his bid being greater than all the others' bid is probability of each person's bid to the power of n minus 1, because they're all identical. You got that part? So if you get this part, this we just calculated was under root b, right? We just calculated this part. So this is bi to the power n minus 1 by 2. Or let me just rewrite this. Bi to the power of n minus 1 by 2. n minus 1 by 2. Okay. So that's it. Now you differentiate it and you calculate the value of bi and you see. So maximize EUI with respect to bi. Take the differential, equate it to 0, get the value of bi, and it will come out to be in terms of some vi and n. I think that is what is probably asked in the question. Let me see the question again. So yeah, they've asked you in terms of v1 and n. So v1, then you just put I equal to 1, you get v1, and you will get the expression. So I don't know what the answer is, but this is the method. Okay, so I think that completes it. And if you have any other problem, like you can solve it and post it in the discussion forum, and I will discuss it from there. So we still have like time till Tuesday. Yeah, so I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with your exam pattern because I'm not involved in that process. So I really don't know. So you can post your question in the discussion forum because I'm the TA only for the live classes. So the regular course TAs can answer your question about the exam pattern and the questions and all that. I have no clue about it, and I think they will answer that. So if you don't get an answer, then I will check and I'll check with them and respond. But yeah. Okay, so I think if there are no other questions, I will end the class here and we'll have the regular class. There's still one very important topic left, perfect Bayesian equilibrium. It's a slightly abstract topic, so it's good if you join the last class, and that will be on Tuesday as per schedule. Okay, thank you.